Welcome to Life Stories Network. Today, I want to share something deeply personal, something that still shakes me every time I think about it. You see, when people talk about family, they usually picture unconditional love, fairness, and support. But my story is different. My story begins with my parents deciding to give my sister everything, literally everything, and leaving me with nothing but confusion, heartbreak, and a feeling that I wasn't even their child. But what happened later, when a stranger handed me a simple envelope, changed my life in ways I never could have imagined. Growing up, I was never jealous of my sister. She was the golden child, the one who got straight A's, the one who shined at family dinners, and the one who always seemed to make my parents proud. I was the quieter one, the dreamer, the kid who didn't always fit into the mold they wanted. And while I noticed the differences in how we were treated, I told myself it didn't matter. I believed love was more important than material things. But then came the day that shattered everything I thought I knew about my family. It started with an announcement. My parents invited us both over, saying they had something important to share. I walked in excited, thinking maybe they were planning a family trip or some kind of celebration. Instead, I watched as they handed my sister a thick folder of documents, smiling ear to ear. "Sweetheart," my dad said, "we've decided it's time to secure your future." Inside those papers was a deed to an $80 million trust fund, the keys to a brand new Tesla, and the title to a mansion on the coast. I felt my chest tighten as I looked on, waiting for my turn, waiting for them to say, "And here's what we've planned for you." But that moment never came. Instead, they just looked at me and said, "We know you'll find your own way." My mom even laughed a little, like it was some kind of joke. My sister hugged them, tears in her eyes, while I stood frozen, my smile fading, my heart breaking silently in the corner. I wanted to scream, to ask why I wasn't good enough, why they had chosen to give her the world and leave me with nothing. But the words got stuck in my throat. All I managed was a quiet, "Congratulations," to my sister, before walking out of that room with my heart in pieces. That night, I lay in bed staring at the ceiling, my mind spinning. Every childhood memory came flooding back, the missed birthdays, the times they showed up to her recitals but not my games, the nights I cried myself to sleep wondering why I was invisible to them. And now, this final act of favoritism sealed it all. They had picked their favorite child once and for all, and it wasn't me. I felt like I didn't belong in my own family anymore. I even questioned if maybe I had been adopted and no one ever told me. The next morning, I decided to clear my head by going for a long walk. That's when something strange happened. As I passed a small cafe, an older man sitting outside waved at me. I didn't recognize him, but something about his gentle smile made me stop. He stood, reached into his coat pocket, and handed me a plain white envelope. "This is for you," he said softly, before walking away without another word. I stood there confused, the envelope trembling in my hands. My first thought was that it had to be some kind of mistake. But when I opened it, my breath caught in my throat. Inside wasn't money, but a handwritten letter. The words began with, "You don't know me, but I knew your father a long time ago." My hands shook as I read further. This stranger explained that he had once been my father's best friend, but after a betrayal, they had gone separate ways. Yet, even through all the bitterness, he had never forgotten me. In fact, he revealed something that left me speechless. My father had once made a promise he had broken, and this man had decided it was finally time for me to know the truth. The letter went on to say that years ago, before my sister was even born, my father had sworn to share a family inheritance equally among his children. But somewhere along the line, greed, pride, or favoritism had changed his heart. The stranger wrote that he couldn't stand by and watch me be left with nothing. And though he wasn't rich, he had put aside something small but meaningful just for me. At the bottom of the envelope was a key, not to a Tesla or a mansion, but to a small bookstore he owned downtown. A place he wanted me to have, a place where I could build something of my own. I stood there on that sidewalk, tears streaming down my face, clutching the letter and the key like they were the most precious things in the world. It wasn't about the money, or the car, or the mansion. It was about someone finally seeing me, finally believing I mattered. In that moment, I realized that worth isn't measured by what people give you, it's measured by the love, trust, and belief they place in you. That stranger, who didn't owe me anything, had given me more than my own parents ever did, hope. And so began a journey I never expected, one that would test me, break me, and rebuild me in ways I couldn't imagine. That little bookstore would become the turning point in my life, but at that moment, all I knew was that the envelope in my hand carried more weight than all the millions my sister had received. Because inside it wasn't just paper, it was a chance to rewrite my story. The next day, I couldn't stop thinking about that envelope. I held it like a lifeline, rereading the stranger's letter until the words practically burned into my memory. My parents had dismissed me as if I didn't exist, but here was this man, someone I had never met, who saw me and decided I was worth something. That bookstore key felt heavier than gold in my hand, because it carried meaning, dignity, and a chance to finally stand on my own. I had no idea what a bookstore could possibly do for me, but I knew I couldn't let this gift go to waste. When I first stepped into the bookstore, it was nothing like the shiny, new mansion my sister had been handed. The paint was chipped, the shelves dusty, and the air smelled faintly of old paper and rain. But somehow, I felt at home. The stranger, whose name I later learned was Mr. Collins, walked me through the space slowly, telling me how he had built it from nothing, how each book on the shelf carried a story, and how every customer who walked through the door left with more than just pages in their hands. He looked at me with kind, steady eyes and said, "Now it's your turn. Make this place your own." At first, I was terrified. I had no business experience, no money to renovate, and barely the confidence to believe I could pull it off. My parents' words, "You'll find your own way," echoed in my head, not as encouragement but as a dismissal. Yet, maybe they were right in a way. Maybe I would find my own way, just not in the way they imagined. With shaky hands, I cleaned the counters, organized the shelves, and painted the front door bright blue. Every brushstroke felt like reclaiming a piece of myself, but the hardest part wasn't fixing the bookstore, it was facing the weight of rejection from my family. I remember one evening when my sister called, her voice dripping with excitement as she described her Tesla, her mansion parties, and the endless praise from our parents. She didn't even ask how I was doing. I sat in silence, clutching the phone, realizing she didn't even see the pain she represented. For her, it was just another story about her perfect life. For me, it was another reminder that I was alone. After that call, I cried harder than I had in years. But when the tears dried, something inside me shifted. I told myself, this is my chance to prove them wrong, not with money or cars, but with heart. Slowly, the bookstore began to breathe again. People from the neighborhood stopped by, curious about the changes. Some came just to chat, others to browse, and a few to buy. I made coffee for customers, asked about their lives, and listened to their stories. Day by day, I realized the gift I had been given wasn't just a store, it was a community. Strangers turned into friends, and those friends turned into something I had always craved, a family. Every thank you, every smile, every shared laugh filled a hole in my heart that my parents had left empty. Still, there were nights when doubt haunted me. I would sit on the bookstore floor after closing, the lights dim, staring at the walls and wondering if I was fooling myself. What if I failed? What if my parents were right to dismiss me? But then I remembered the letter. Mr. Collins had believed in me when no one else did. That belief became my fuel. I taped his words to the back office wall, "It's your turn." Whenever I felt weak, I looked at those words and found the strength to keep going. Months passed, and to my surprise, the bookstore became more than a small shop. It became a haven. Local writers asked to hold readings there. Children gathered in the corner for story hours. Couples bought books as gifts for each other. One evening, a young woman whispered to me that the store had saved her from loneliness. I realized then that what I had was bigger than wealth, it was purpose. My parents had given my sister material treasures, but life had given me something far more powerful, meaning. Then came the day I'll never forget. Out of nowhere, my parents decided to visit. They hadn't spoken to me in months, not since the night they gave my sister the world and left me behind. They walked into the bookstore, looking around with thin smiles, as if they were touring some small exhibit. My mother glanced at the shelves and said, "Well, this is nice." My father added, "But surely, this can't compare to what your sister has." His words stung like a knife, but for the first time, I didn't flinch. I stood tall, looked him straight in the eye, and said, "No, it doesn't compare. Because what I have here is real. What I have is love, connection, and something you'll never understand." For the first time in my life, I wasn't begging for their approval. I didn't need it anymore. Their eyes widened, maybe shocked by the strength in my voice, maybe realizing they couldn't break me anymore. They left without saying much else, but I didn't care. The customers in the store that day, the people who clapped quietly after they walked out, those were my family now. And for the first time, I felt free after my parents' visit to the bookstore. Something inside me changed permanently. Their cold eyes, their dismissive tone, it no longer crushed me the way it once did. Instead, it fueled me. For the first time in my life, I understood that their approval was not my currency. My worth didn't live in their hands, and I didn't need their validation to thrive. What I needed was already around me, the walls of that bookstore, the laughter of strangers who had become family, and the quiet strength I had discovered within myself. One evening, as I was locking up, Mr. Collins appeared again. He walked slower this time, his cane tapping softly against the pavement. I rushed to help him, and he smiled, handing me another small envelope. My heart skipped. Another letter? Another surprise? He chuckled at my expression and said, "You've done well, better than I ever imagined. This envelope, what you found here." For a moment, anger surged in me. I wanted to remind her of all the nights I cried, all the times she never stood up for me, all the moments she basked in their love while I sat in the shadows. But when I looked into her eyes, I saw a reflection of myself, the same pain, the same longing. And against all odds, I opened my arms. She broke down sobbing, and I held her, realizing that maybe she was a victim, too. We had both been shaped by the choices our parents made, and now we had the chance to heal differently. In the weeks that followed, she visited often, sometimes helping with customers, sometimes just sitting quietly in the corner, watching as people filled the store with laughter and warmth. Slowly, the distance between us closed. We weren't the golden child and the forgotten one anymore. We were just two siblings, trying to find our place in the world. And for the first time, I felt like maybe I wasn't entirely alone in my family after all. My parents, however, never changed. They continued to live in their own world of favoritism and pride. But by then, it didn't matter anymore. I no longer needed their mansion, their millions, or even their acknowledgement. What I had built was real. What I had created from the pain of being left behind was something far stronger than money. I had built a family out of strangers, a purpose out of rejection, and a future out of an envelope that most people would have overlooked. Standing in my bookstore one evening, watching children giggle during story hour, hearing the soft murmur of neighbors chatting like old friends, I felt a peace I never thought possible. My life didn't turn out the way I expected, it turned out better. Because the truth is, wealth without love is emptiness. But even the smallest gift, when given with love, can rewrite a life. And so, whenever someone asks me about my sister's mansion, her Tesla, or her millions, I just smile and say, she was given the world. But I was given the world. But I was given an envelope. And inside that envelope, I found myself.